innovation just for Italian point of view, because as an association and a lot of other associations, we try to add to Constitution the Article 3544 bis. The 34 is the right to school, and the 34 bis would be the right to internet, because it's one of the grid, as we say, one of those. So let me introduce Michele Morgan, VP Europe, BITS2 Systems, and Mauro Annunziato, Coordinator EU Smart City Project. So, Michele, energy grids are a strong part of a city, of course. Maybe smart, maybe not, but they are in the city. So can you tell us the role of innovation in energy grid, please?
Okay, well, maybe I'll take you through a little bit of a story first. First of all, thank you, Canada, for hosting this. I am one of those immigrants to Canada, having left Northern Ireland, so 30 years in Canada. So proud Canadian and EU citizen now living in Madrid. The heading of this topic is public-private partnerships, and we had a bit of a discussion last night around what that actually meant. So I'm going to give you my definition of what it means and take you a little bit on a journey to get to sort of the question that was asked. Public for me, so I work for a technology provider today, but my prior life was what I call being on the other side of the fence, the big divide. And one of my roles was with BC Hydro, so the utility that provides 90% of the energy to British Columbia. And I would define that as being the public part of a public-private partnership. Being on the technology provider side, I would define that as being the private. And I have some views around what those partnerships should look like, having taken a long journey on both sides. My role in BC Hydro was a leader responsible for the smart metering initiative 10 plus years ago. And one of my first jobs was to develop a business case for the province of British Columbia to define a return on investment in a business case that made sense for British Columbia. And that was no small undertaking back then because smart metering and smart grids were somewhat of ideas as opposed to actually working. And we actually looked towards Italy at that time, who had progressed further down that path than we were, to look for ideas and understanding around the technology part of it. My boss, the CEO, said to me, Michele, stop. He says, what we need to look at is what is the benefit to our citizens of British Columbia. So stop thinking technology and start to think about the benefits that we need to provide to our citizens, our customers. And so we started to focus on, what are those benefits? And one of the biggest ones that we need to focus on, and we've all taken this path since then, is how do we provide knowledge and control to our citizens around their energy use? Because up until then, we were just like every other utility, historical utility, where I, as a consumer of energy, knew nothing about that. So really the focus was, how do we provide that knowledge and information? How do we provide control into the hands of the citizens? And we talked about technology in the context of information, in the context of putting in-home devices, putting portals in place, and providing real-time information into the customer's hands. Along with that, then we got into the discussions around technology, around the grid, around what we called automating the grid. And automating the grid is sort of a funny term because it didn't mean ripping out all the lines and wires. It meant putting technology on the grid. So the grids today are still old and archaic. It's the technology that gets put on those grids that starts to provide information around what's going on in the grids, and the smart meters that are providing information of what's going on between the home and the grids and between the businesses and the grids. So we focused on not the technology again, but the reliability and the efficiency, and also the protection of the grid with respect to our citizens. So what has that got again to do with the customers? Well, ultimately, how do we get to a place where our customers not only have control within the energy use of their home, but when our customers want to actually start using clean energy, whether it's solar panels, even wind, how do they then start to feed on and off the grid? Well, in order to be able to do that, you do need technology. You can't do that without technology. But you need to use technology responsibly when you go down this path. And this is where I get into the partnership between the private and the public. So, you know, I do come from the technology end of the business, and of course, you know, we love to get excited about technology. And, you know, I've heard, IBM being used there, Siemens, etc. And yes, on the technology side, sometimes the drivers are different. And this is where I have very strong beliefs that those drivers should not be different. They should be in partnership. And we heard about trust in the last session. Because we can lose our way. Even I, because my life before going on to the provider side was as a CIO, so being on the IT side. And you can lose your way. You can start to only think about technology and forget about the reason why you exist and what you're there for. So it is really important that this public-private partnership gets addressed. And I believe that we are, as technologists and on the technology side, have a responsibility to the business, to the customers. And that is to stop thinking technology and start understanding what are the problems that need to be solved from the customer's perspective. And we need to bridge that divide. So there's a huge chasm in the middle, and it is really important to bridge that divide. So we talked about, Francesco talked about, now we're getting faced with, billions of data points coming at us on a daily basis. We talk about the machine-to-machine or the human-to-machine challenges that we have today. And it is getting more complex. And, when I talk about BC Hydro 10 years ago, what's happening now is, billions of times much greater in terms of the challenges that faces. But those challenges are also opportunities as well. So there is a massive amount of data being generated out there. There are utilities out there that say, there is no solution out there. There are no tools out there, so I'm going to ignore it. But that's losing opportunity. So I believe it is the public-private partnerships that have to come together to start to really understand this information, eliminate the noise, and start to understand how do I get real, useful information, not only to start satisfying my customers' needs and start creating better opportunities, but to actually drive innovation as well. So there's an ability to drive innovation, but those two have to come together in order to be able to do that. So I have very strong views, not only from being on both sides, but from the technology perspective, that we have to embrace that. We have to stop thinking about what our goals and drivers are and start to think about what the business and the customer's drivers are, and then start to meet those challenges. So I heard you say listen. I think listening is hugely important.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Mauro, is there a strong interaction then among public administrations, private companies, and citizens? We said before, citizen-centric, citizen needs. We have customer needs, as she said. But when and how then can private sector partnership can be useful, help cities to become more intelligent, smart, whatever?
Yes. Okay. Before to start, let me thanks to the Canada Embassy to invited me in this interesting discussion. So ENEA is a national board for research on energy, environment, and innovation. And normally we running several projects, at least 10 projects for smart city in 10 different cities in Italy. And obviously, normally, when you apply in a city, normally the partnership is composed by research team, local administration, and industry. So normally, we face with this kind of problem. I will start my discussion starting from the last talking of John Young, because when he was speaking about connectivity, I was thinking about which is the value of the connectivity. So I remember that I want to mention Jacques Monod. He said that evolution jumps are connected with the emerging of new media. And he mentioned the language as one of this jump. And language is connectivity. When start connectivity, the dimension is completely different. It's clear for all of us the difference between a number of computers and when these computers are connected and become the network, so the web network, is completely different. So this value is huge value. Let me come back to the city. Try to imagine that the city is a sort of new media. If all things are separated, it's not a media. It's just spot, service, but it's completely different. When you are able to connect all these media, all these things, so you create a new media, and you create a new situation where you can develop a new evolution. Let me make a very simple one example, but there are many. We are working in the field of connection between the city and the smart grids and the grids. So, an example in Italy, in next year, from authority exactly, we will have multi-meterings for smart meters, so water, gas, and electricity. And this is very important things. But if these data are useful only to billing for the people or only to control the grids, so the value is not very high. The other hand, we are developing domotics and neighbors where all the smart homes are connected in one central aggregator. An example then can give you service for, in example, how to spend less money in your house, how save water and save and so on. And if you are able to put in connection, in a dialogue between the smart home system, domotic system, and the smart metering systems, it's a revolution, because you can have this data, because normally the metering the cost is high for a house. And you have this data, and it's possible for a citizen give, in example, this data accessible to all the market for app. So you can have a app, in example, to help you in managing of energy, but also help for maintaining of your appliance, or in example, health. If you don't work on any appliance, it means that probably you could have some problems. If in 3 days you don't have any action in house, probably there is a problem, in example, for aging, and then I can send an information to other things. So there are a lot of possibilities. There is another market that can be open in this case. And imagine that the aggregator know exactly which is the consumption the day after, in example, because they control the consumption of the people. They can send this information to the distribution, and they gain another value. So if we are able to connect all this service, we are able to activate a circular economy inside the community. The problem is not the data. The problem is let to circulate the data. So this is a different model. So this is based on connectivity. And obviously, connecting services, it means also connective utilities. And obviously, this is based on action like public-private partnership. This is very important. This is the center of the smart city. So it's important that public give the commitment for some specification and give the direction. And in example, establish the connection, establish the regulation, in example. And on the other hand, the only possibility to have investment is based on the private, because otherwise it's impossible. And I say that also research field is very important in order to design the service, design the connection of the service. So, and then qualify the service. In example, when you speak about monitoring, it's quite difficult. We have to speak about key performance indicator. It's not so simple, because it's very difficult to understand the difference between 1 year and another year in a building, in example. So this is very important. And, but I would like to add some other, one single aspect. So when we say the PPP, public-private partnership, so we forget that there are another component that is very important. It's a PPP plus C. That means community. A community is not citizen. At the moment, the relation we are thinking is utility and citizen. But this is different. Community is different things. Just I would like to give you an example of a project that we are proposed in, we candidate Roma as a lighthouse city in the last European call with this kind of idea. So the idea is that the community is very active in urban regeneration. Maybe we can stop to speak about urban regeneration and start to speak about community regeneration. This approach is on the middle. It's not completely basic on the urban design, but is more intended in terms of governing the self-organization of a community. In this case, in this project, in example, we make a refurbishment, large-scale refurbishment of houses, and also a fleet of electric public mobility with the electric bus, based on demand mobility on demand. And the basic idea is that the citizen, we help the citizen to create a community company, a cooperative community company. And they are very active in the creation, in the apply of refurbishment program and the management of the smart service in the community. So we call this approach is a double drive. The first drive is because the value of the neighbor is increasing because the houses are better, are more efficient, and the mobility is more efficient, and also soft mobility is implemented. But the second drive is that the actor of the urban transformation is the citizen itself. So this means that you bring jobs, you bring a sort of sense of ownership of your community, of the infrastructure. Infrastructure is not from the city, it's for the community. And so I think that this is a model that we have to considering, and we have to considering that this model is very close to PPP, and probably is another way to see the evolution. And obviously, I hope that it's not easy, because the problem is a new generation of smart city project. Because in order to apply this project, you have to convince people to make a little investment. And this means that you are very, very persuasive in your project. And you have exactly to understand which is the business model, which is the stakeholder involvement, all the stakeholders' involvement, which is the role of the citizen, and then create an organization. This is exactly an example of what I say, governing the self-organization. We create exactly one institution that is collaborative governance of the community, including at the same table the community company, the utilities, and the local administration. So another term that is very interesting to considering is a co-design. Co-design, it means that any decision for that community should be based obviously by the local administration, but is continuously discussed with the people of the community.
Thank you, Mauro. Thank you. Well, a keyword I had before was indicator. Now I have another one, which is governance. From your point of view, is it essential, and how can we both have some better governance of all these actors involved?
I definitely think governance is very important. I think how you set up your governance and how you use your governance has to be carefully thought through. Otherwise, you can have governance for the sake of governance as opposed to really being focused on what you're trying to govern as well. Even within, for example, within the smart metering program that I was responsible for, we had very strong governance, but not just governance within the entity itself, the utility itself, but governance from the province of British Columbia as well, and governance from the citizens, and allowing the ability to feed into that process and allow the ability to be vocal and to be heard as well.
So we are working to try to give this term a concrete model, and we work with Lewis, that is Faculty of Economy, and we create a structure in the community and a book that gives guidelines for interaction between local administration and the community and the utilities, and then a procedure in order to share the decisions. There is one very interesting point that we can use in order to apply the collaborative governance that is based on, in Italy, this is a general European trend, but in Italy, in the last year, there was a very interesting law. This law gives the possibility to the local administration to give some service to the community association, and they take off money from the taxes. And they can assign service like maintaining of public space and, in example, service for mobility. This is exactly what we are working. So a number of services that the community can apply, and obviously creating job, creating discussion, and under the collaboration with the local administration. Coming back to the indicator, this is absolute. It's very important aspects because, as I said before, we have to speak about key performance indicator. Key performance indicator is very important because is the indicator that I can use to compare my behavior, my performance with the performance and behavior and consumption of the other people of the community, the other people, the other cities, and the other of the country. In this way, we are proposing in Italy one specific instrument, is a national instrument that we call Public Energy Living Lab, that is a center of collection of data and elaborate in real-time data coming from public structures. And we started from the public lighting, because we have a project with 800 municipalities that are in this project. And we measure in real time all these KPIs. And for the moment, we started from lighting, but then is intended to extend to school and offices. And all these data are accessible to all the citizens in form of KPIs. So you can share and compare the performance, in example, of your city in respect to the other cities.
So, up to you now. Yeah, just wait for the mic, please.
To Mauro Annunziato for the thank you for quoting the regulation. Agicom, l'autorità italiana per le garanzie nelle comunicazioni, together with l'autorità per l'energia elettrica e il gas, so the regulation for the electricity, gas and water systems, are working together on that part of the regulation. Just an information, we are starting up a new committee, the machine-to-machine, il comitato M2M, the M2M, machine-to-machine communication committee, and we'd like to invite the community in the work of that committee, just to understand the regulation that we have to write in consideration of the development of the smart metering. Because don't forget that we are implementing smart metering due to a regulation obligation. Okay, thank you.
Yes, let me remark what you say, that the importance of the difference between the knowledge of the data from the smart meter and to machine communication. Because in the first case, out the door of my home, there is a meter, but it's impossible to go there to see what's happened. And now there are some other object. I mentioned the smart info that you can read in your home. This is a plug that you put in a plug, and there is a number. And it's impossible to understand nothing. So how I can use this data? I cannot use. But if it's possible to establish a dialogue between the smart meter system and, in example, the domotic system in my home, this changed dramatically, because I am able to send this data, to open this data to the market. I control this data, so the privacy is under my control, and this is a door open in a completely new market.
So, just to have an idea, the public telephony and the private telephony, the private metering and the public metering system. So, we need probably a method to address the smart meter, or at least to collect an average or an extract of data. And there is also a public consultation of Garante della Privacy on the new issues related to the Internet of Things, and I suppose that that problem could be addressed also in that public consultation, but not only. We have another public consultation from Garante dell'Autorità dell'Energia Elettrica e Gas on the smart distribution system. It's a new public consultation. I suppose that you have to give your contribution also to that regulation authority. Thank you.
Yeah, there are a number of things that you said there. And one is, and this is where the discussion around the human-to-machine interface is so critically important. Otherwise, you're going to end up with devices in your home or even portals that are telling you something that you don't understand. Even today, when I look at my utility bill, and we don't have smart meters in Spain yet, I don't understand it. So I want to understand it in my terms. And that's why it's critical that there is listening, there is governance, and we look at that human-to-machine interface. Then you go to the security and privacy component of it, and that's a tough one. That's a tough challenge when you now have a lot of devices generating a lot of information, and that fear of falling into the wrong hands. And when you've got the smart meters on the homes, and we went through that in British Columbia as well. So again, how do you protect your customer's interests in the process of providing information? And you have to do that through a variety of not only technology, but through policies, and that's where you need to look to your country's policies around that. So learning more about what's going on in Europe, I see how Germany's trying to tackle that. I'm now understanding how Italy is looking at this multimeter, but again, the privacy is going to come into play on that as well. So you can do it, but you need to pay attention to it, and you can do it through policy, and you can do it through technology as well. But it is critically important as well.
Other comments or questions? No? May I just say a couple of things? This is my vision coming from what we said this morning, from this morning panel. Trust among actors for a bigger and better ecosystem. That's something that we can agree, I believe. 3C, citizen-centric city. that I like very much. I don't know who said it, but you probably, and like very much. And it's something that I'm saying since some months. We are in the co-era, collaboration, cooperation, community, connection. And you said, you had something, cooperative community company. The company was something that I didn't think about, but there is inside. And then co-design. So we are really in the co-era, no doubt on that. And just to inform you, just Italian people probably, which can be interested in it, we are working with the Link Campus University, which is here in Rome, for making a master in smart city. So you're all welcome to give us your advice and well, I don't know. We are working on that, so we can do something together. And then finally, I really like to thank all of you, all of our panelists for this morning, because they share with us their expertise, their experience. So thank you very much indeed. Jessica, probably the mic is for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to our speakers in the latest panel, our speakers for all of this morning, and to Flavia, who I think we can all agree has done an exceptional job, as we expected, in moderating today's discussion. So we are now ready for lunch. They're still in the process of setting it up, but you're all welcome to go outside. We'll open the door through there and have a drink while they finish preparing our lunch barbecue. And we'll be resuming here at 2:30. So we look forward to seeing you all of you at home as well. And thank you very much.